so McLaren is struggling a lot. We expected them to do a lot better. We saw in qualifying, Hadjar was ahead of Piastri and Norris. They were in the back. And in the race, fifth, Piastri crashed out, not really his fault. Norris came fifth and barely held off Verstappen, who started off in P20. So it's clear that the McLaren lacks race pace and it lacks one lap pace. And the question is, how is that the case when they have the best balance, the best, supposedly the best window, at least during the last regs, the best balance, the best ride quality, better over bumps and things like that, but they just have no pace. So why are they so far behind? We've done our research and it's three things. The first thing is that even though they have the same engine that Mercedes has, and they should at least have the same available raw power, their deployment, for lack of a better word, sucks. And the reason their deployment sucks is literally because of their software. They don't have the software that Mercedes has, as well as not having the integration. They haven't integrated right. And what we're seeing is that Mercedes software is very good at predictive analysis, whether it's a lap or a race, or in how to deploy energy, where to deploy energy, and strategy, deployment strategy. So it seems that McLaren's deployment strategy is not as good because it simply doesn't have the software that Mercedes has. They have most of the hardware. They have the power unit, most of it. You know, there are some differences, but they just don't have that deployment energy. I mean, they don't have that predictive GPS software. And that's why on the straights, we saw Mercedes was 0.8 of a second faster than them on the straights. That's a recipe for you ain't going to win. when you're losing 0.8 seconds, and that's because of the harvesting. So they don't harvest well. The second thing is they've got Rob Marshall, who worked with Newey, and I think the part of their DNA, the Rob Marshall DNA, Newey, the Rob Marshall and Newey DNA from Red Bull is that they like a tightly packaged car. They want everything tightly packaged for aerodynamics. But in this new era in which energy recovery system takes up a lot of energy, that tight packing is leading to overheating. And the overheating is now making them have to reduce their capacity to deploy, or else the engine will just disintegrate like Tel Aviv. Okay, now like Tel Aviv. Now, the third thing is that this car was made. The McLaren's genius design was made for the downforce era, where you had Venturi tunnels, you had complex downforce, you had a low floor, and you had complex pathways for air during the ground effects era. But now this is an era where downforce, the regs don't allow for as much downforce and ground effects. So the floors are flat and everything. So what's happening with McLaren is that since they're built for efficiency and downforce and stability, they have too much drag coming off of the straights because they haven't adapted to this era to be able to make their cars pointy. You need to have pointy cars in this era, and because there's not as much downforce because you're not allowed to go close to the ground. So you have to maximize straight line speed for high speed corners and for straights and have that pointy setup. And we all know McLaren is the antithesis of pointiness, which is why you're seeing Ferrari and Mercedes and Red Bull, especially Mercedes and Red Bull, are outdoing them because they have that pointy setup. And here's where it's hurting them. When they come off of the corners and want to transition to, when they come into the corners and want to transition to getting more downforce. No, it's the other way. When they're coming off the corners, they're not dumping their downforce in enough time, especially when they're pressing the X button for straight line deployment. It's almost like a parachute is behind them, and they're getting too much drag and lag, which is why they're so much slower on the straights. And also another problem that they have is because the fact that their car is not pointy and everything else, and it's overheating, they're struggling during the race to stay within 1 second for the active aero. I mean, for basically the DRS, the manual override. They don't have that because their tires are working a lot harder on straight. And so when they can't get within a 1 second range on the straights, also because they have so much drag coming off the corners, they can't get within a second of their opponents to press that button. So we're seeing an overall problem in philosophy of design, which is not fitting them for this era. I nailed this one, motherfucker. Your turn, Afolabi.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit the right notes perfectly. And I'm going to start from the torque mapping, the McLaren torque mapping. That's the software that tells the engine how smoothly to deliver power. This was dangerously miscalibrated. It wasn't properly calibrated. And we see a classic example of where this happened during Piastri's crash. Basically, what happened was that he was exiting turn 4. There was a glitch in the software. Unexpected 100 kilowatts was, deposited in the rear wheels while he was downshifting. So it instantly snapped the rear traction and put him into the wall. So basically, this was caused by the engine torque mapping, which was not well calibrated. So because you now have 50-50 equal power contribution and the MGU-H is gone, now you have MGU-K and the batteries to deploy a massive 350 kilowatts of electrical thrust. Now, this has to be intelligently calculated and deployed by the software system. If it's not gotten right, we are going to have a lot more crashes like this. And then secondly, another important factor was the fact that like you rightly mentioned, on the straights, you need your X mode, which is supposed to give you low drag, because you don't want any type of friction or drag on the straights. But somehow they are getting high drag on straights, and when they're entering into corners, the downforce is not high enough. So basically, this Z and X mode thing too is causing them some problems, and this is affecting their lap times. If they don't correct this very quickly, it's going to increase.
Yeah, well, the problem is that the car is made for balance, but in an era where everything is supposed to be high speed and generated power from the engine, especially from the electrical, it's very balanced, but it's burdensome because it's made for downforce.
Exactly,
it has burdensome capability for drag, and they haven't gotten there, and they've never been an aero person. And you mentioned that thing with the torque. They have all kinds of problems. They have problems with mapping out a whole race, mapping out one lap, and also with the software to counteract all these things. And we know that Mercedes stayed on top of that, and Mercedes, what's really helping them is not just that they have a powerful ICE. They've got a powerful ICE. They've got software which is integrated everything with the chassis and everything, and even with a little bit of tight wrapping in this, they have outwash. I think they have good aero to cool the tires and everything. So it's basically they've been preparing for these regulations while McLaren was winning in the ground force. And McLaren is still in the ground force. Is still in the ground effects era. Mercedes has been preparing for this era probably 2, 3, probably 4 years, and they were just being patient because they knew they had nothing to win with during the Red Bull era, and they weren't prepared. And so once again, I said McLaren has all the balance they want. They've got good chicanes and everything, but that would only matter if it was a slow speed competition. But this competition, the cars aren't limited in pace, so they're going to be far behind. Their balance is of no use to them. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's as if their design philosophy or concept is still based in the ground effects era. And you can see that the 2026 cars are supposed to be more nimble, shorter and narrower, and even lighter. But McLaren hasn't found the mechanical grip needed to make up for their simplified floor design. So the car's balance between understeer and oversteer is a bit messy for now because the car is sliding around. Norris is being forced to chew, through new, very narrow 18-inch tires much faster than, he's used to. So basically,
they're not used to the tires and the torque.
Problem too. So basically, they need to correct all these things. And like you rightly mentioned, I think Mercedes-Benz have the head start over every other person, not just in the ICE, but being able to integrate the electrical part is in sync with every other part of the vehicle. So
now Audi is just as good with the electrical part as Mercedes is, but they don't have.
But Peter Windsor said it was Audi that made them to dump MGU-H. That was because of Audi. Audi said if they didn't dump it, they weren't going to come.
Yeah, and it's paying off for Audi. That's why they're top. They're just basically almost, I think, top of the mid group, the mid-level group of cars.
It's a good start for them. I think it's a good start.
And Red Bull has a very good deployment and everything else on MGUK. So Red Bull is going to be up there with Mercedes. What Red Bull lacks is that extreme raw power that Mercedes has, which part of it may be coming from the loophole.
I'd say that raw power is probably there. It looked as if they were conservative in deploying that power.
Oh, yeah, in Australia. Like I said, Hadjar came third in qualifying. That's saying a lot. Hadjar beat Leclerc in qualifying. People don't realize this. They're not talking about this. Hadjar beat Leclerc in
So
qualifying.
had he not lost some electrical power, we would have seen the full ability of that, the deployment of that power.
Yeah.
I think they were conservative in the race.
People are thinking, they think this is Ferrari versus Mercedes. This is more like Mercedes versus Red Bull. We'll see in China.
Yeah.
China will tell us more. All right, so let's start to follow. It's been a great show as usual and succinct.
Yeah. So basically, problems of McLaren are not far-fetched. They need to get their torque mapping right, avoid the glitches that come from the software that is supposed to be intelligently deploying power to the rear wheels and to the front wheels when it is needed, and maintain the balance so that a certain surge of power doesn't throw, the driver off guard, at different critical phases of the race. If they can get this right, and of course the X and the Z mode thing, if it's more balanced, and mechanical grip issues too, that they're supposed to have sorted out, coming from the ground effect era. If all these three things are sorted out, I think we can have a better performance. But they're still clearly behind Mercedes, Red Bull, and maybe to an extent Ferrari.
Yeah, they'll catch up eventually. This is early days in this race.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, take us out.
Yeah, it's been another brilliant Formula One show. I've been discussing McLaren's and the issues we observed in Australia and what they can do to sort this out quickly as we pivot to Shanghai this weekend. And for Mustafa and myself, we'll be back again in Formula One.
All right, can you do